Dalla colonna sonora del film Il Padrino, musica di Nino Rota.
So that's how I remember my grandparents. Like, they were just regular, like your grandparents would be anybody's grandparents. We knew nothing of anything else that was going on.
That's who the mob was called the Arm. Anybody that worked for the mob that was part of the Arm.
But you know what happened? Is the wiretaps. You had something coming out of Buffalo that scared somebody somewhere.
They didn't want the public to know. They knew. They didn't want the public to know. It's like they didn't want the public to know about aliens. Same type of thing. When you think about it, the government's always trying to keep information down from the general public. It got exposed. Now they have a problem. The problem leads to eventually that if President Kennedy gets assassinated, a private group of New York State troopers is established to do surveillance here in Western New York about Magadino's crime family, and we know Magadino had a direct relationship with the Kennedy crime family because the FBI produced exhibits proving such comments were made by Stefano Magadino and his crime family regarding Kennedy.
Two 9-volt batteries, so much.
As a uniformed trooper.
All right, so George, you want to tell us a little bit about how this all started?
Yes, I was a recruit in the New York State Troopers in 1957, assigned to recruit training at Troop A headquarters in Batavia, New York.
Well, about 8 years ago, George Corrales, who I knew because he worked in the Erie County DA's office after he retired from the state police as one of their top investigators with the BCI. He came up to me and said, "I want you to write this book." I said, "Well, about what?"
This individual brought to the attention that the FBI and your federal government basically said there was nothing organized on this level. And then all of a sudden, here's the New York State Police who've already had a small amount of intel. And then now when this broke through, the order was given to go ahead forward. And that's where you basically get into George's group.
After the raid, which made the state police famous and got worldwide publicity, embarrassed the hell out of J. Edgar Hoover. Then when Nelson Rockefeller came in, he said he expanded the secret operations. And that's when the Buffalo unit and a number of about 4 or 5 other secret state police units were set up all through the state to wiretap suspected mobsters' homes.
Lieutenant Lombard, who was head of the BCI in Batavia, New York, and he says to me, "Trooper, I want you to go to the barracks and meet Maury Gavin." So I says to him, "Yes, sir, what's it about?" He says, "You're asking questions you shouldn't ask." And that's the way the state police were at that time. So I says, "Yes, sir." And I went to meet Maury Gavin. And he says to me, he says, "You're going to work on a squad." And I says, "Where's the squad?" He says, "In the basement of the barracks." And so I went down there and I saw a couple of wiretap machines there and another trooper working there. So he says to me, "I'm going to show you how to do these wiretaps. They're all on gambling." So I says, "Yes, sir," and I started to do that work. All of a sudden, Maury Gavin, who was the senior down at the station in the barracks, says, "I want you to take this equipment and meet me at the state mental institution." So I says, "Okay," and I says, "And where should I go?" He says, "Again," he says, "you know how it goes. I'll tell you where to go." So I pack up some of the equipment and I put it in the back of my car.
And he told me about this secret New York State police unit that successfully wiretapped all of Stefano Magadino's top lieutenants.
And I was on my way to the state mental institution. I got to the state mental institution, which was located at 400 Forest Avenue in the city of Buffalo. I went to the back of the building, to the area, looking for Maury Gavin, who told me to get there. Finally, he came up to me and he says, "Pull up to this broken down building." And I did. I pulled my car up to this broken down building. He says, we're going to go in there now, and this is going to be where we're going to work from.
George Corrales was working for a unit which made friends with people at what was then called the New York Telephone Company, and they arranged to turn over a New York Telephone Company van to this unit.
There was 3 other troopers that joined that particular unit. There was 5 of us in that particular unit, and what happened is word come from Albany that we're going to be a investigative unit, both using tactical and intelligence information from that particular location.
And whenever they want to wiretap into a mob's unit, they used the setup from their friends at the New York Telephone Company. They would go and set up secret wiretapping equipment in the phones of the homes of the Magadino lieutenants, which gave the state police unit where Corrales worked total access to every phone call made from the homes and some of the restaurants where the Magadino lieutenants both lived and met in the Buffalo area.
And that's exactly what we did. We had equipment there from all areas of Western New York, and we started to gain information about organized crime in this area.
Set up tape recording units around their facilities in the Niagara Falls area.
The word came from Albany that that's what we were supposed to do. Pick up organized crime information and then solicit it back to troop headquarters in Albany, New York.
The FBI was so impressed with the New York State Police unit's work that they ended up making arrangements so that they would get copies of all the transcripts the Corrales unit was making of the FBI telephone calls.
That's what we did, and we stayed there for approximately 10 years, right in the middle of organized crime areas in Buffalo's west side, which was very important to us because we could pick up our wiretaps and our live bugs we did, and therefore then we could give this information to other troopers that could consummate arrests. And it was starting to be very, very busy in that particular unit.
And the Corrales unit worked for almost a decade, into the early 1970s.
Sometimes we worked 24 hours a day, sometimes we worked 7 days a week. There was only 5 of us, and it was a very secretive unit. We gained no information there from any other troopers. Everything we did not use any mail to go to Albany. We did not use any of our credit cards to pick up gasoline. It was extremely secretive, and there was only 5 of us. Nobody knew we were there. We found it to be a perfect spot because we were right in the midst not only of organized crime in the Western New York of Buffalo, but we were also in the midst of a hospital where many, many patients walked among us. This is what made it so secretive for us. We stayed there for 10 years, and in those 10 years, we gave information to other trooper barracks that concluded investigations that concluded many, many crimes that were solved with the information that we obtained from the wiretaps and the live bugs. A live bug is something that we used to put into a home or a building and to gain information from that. A wiretap was something that you gained that you didn't have information from in a room.
And George will tell you one from just even when they were wiretapping. Everybody, even their wives and kids, anybody that was able to vote, the mafia was telling you to vote for John Kennedy. So when Bobby Kennedy began to come down on them, that's when you have issues too, because now the people that helped get your brother in, you're going against. And I think that's where a lot of frustration comes from. The FBI knowing what was going on and not saying anything, because you got to remember, like we said, big money. There's no crime when there's big money. You got about the Kennedys and the mafia together during Prohibition. That's where everybody got their money.
So what you have eventually is then the New York State Troopers establishes a group here in Western New York. which is George Careless is a part of, and they're under the impression that they're here to watch the organized crime families do whatever they do, steal fur coats, golf balls, throw cars in the lake. But in reality, the politicians are using them. I believe, in my own personal opinion, after reading and researching all this information, that they're being used, George Careless and his group, to provide information to the politicians so they can watch their own backs, so they don't get revealed. Because the worst thing a politician could ever be revealed to is having an affiliation with an organized crime family member, or a member of the mafia,
some kind of crime.
Anybody like that at all. So I believe George's group personally was set up to establish such a situation.
Well, when you look at his group and the things that they did, everything that they established and everything that they did, I mean, it sounds like some kind of a mystery or something like that, from stealing cars and doing this and doing that. All that stuff is little things that happen along the way. But what was in the recordings? Why did they take the one individual who was the only one who spoke the certain dialects, and why did the FBI take him to Los Angeles? Then they then were getting the tapes, sending them to Los Angeles, having it sent back to them with the FBI's assistance. So something on those tapes, from when George began to when they ended, something on those tapes revealed something.
Or they're still waiting for it to be revealed, because when then the old man died in 1974, all the material was ordered by New York State to be destroyed and burned. And we do have some pieces of the material that was salvaged from the fire, but there's no record at all of any of these transcripts or anything at all for anybody to view. All we have left is the living record of George Careless and what he did. So you ask yourself the question, why? You can foil anything. The government allows you to foil and request copies of documents, but there are no documents to support anything George Careless did other than a few articles in the Buffalo Evening News.
When you look at the protocol and the procedure of the nightly, it's almost like Spy Town. I mean, the guys would, at a certain point in the day, take the daily tapes, the daily transcripts that an individual was a trooper from Syracuse he was Sicilian and he could speak some of the dialects. Then they would take those transcripts, put those, I mean, it's like secret squirrel stuff. I mean, they put it in a locked briefcase where a trooper locked himself to that briefcase, and he got on Braniff Airlines, which is an airlines of those days, a local one, and they flew to Albany, and that stuff was just personally, it wasn't given to the head of the New York State Police. It was given personally right to the governor of the state of New York. Now, you can get the whole story from George, but the most interesting one is that on these tapes, they heard that a certain individual wanted to run for president, and that in south of here, the individual's name was Russell Bufalino, and he had knowledge of the governor of that state,
which would be Pennsylvania and Ohio border.
Right. And he basically found out some of that gentleman's background that would be very detrimental to him upcoming as a candidate for the president of the United States. So that information was given to Governor Rockefeller. He then flew on his private plane to that governor's airport. That governor then got on that plane with Governor Rockefeller. This is according to George, and George can back it up. And that governor in Ohio was given the information that Governor Rockefeller had on him. And when that plane landed, that guy was no longer running for president of the United States.
There was another thing that happened that he was talking about the political end of it. We had Joe Falcone indicted down in, we thought we had him indicted down in Brooklyn on a case. It's tied in with Anthony Scotto, Longshoremen's. And so we went down, we're down there, testimony's going in, we're in the hall, and the prosecutor came to me and he says, uh-oh, this does not look good. This is going to go down the tubes. And I said, what are you talking about? See that guy coming down the hall? Comes from Justice. Bobby Kennedy sent him up. And no indictment.
Plus, you have the paranoia of the politicians. They might get revealed that they have affiliations with the organized crime units because the organized crime families produce money, which help politicians get elected. And as being a former politician here in the city of Niagara Falls, I'm well aware of how politics work. Organized crime tries to come in, unions try to come in, they try to dictate policy through politicians. The politicians did not want to be revealed. So, they were revealed. Appalachia was raided. Guess what? Everyone's exposed now. Now we got a problem in the United States. The problem is, guess what? The Italian Americans that are here, even though they are criminals at this point in time, are taking control of something that was controlled by the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants up until that point.
So you're saying basically what had happened was Joe Kennedy is the one that messed over the mob.
Yes, he double-crossed the mob.
Along with Bobby, both of them. You're right. You're right. I never.
No, he made his fortunes through illegal alcohol during Prohibition, but then he abandoned the mob, his mob connections, and went into
politics.
Film. He took over the movies. Gloria Swanson was his lover. This is while he was married and having all these kids with Rose Kennedy. Where Gloria Swanson was his lover in Los Angeles, while Rose was back in Boston.
See, what happened there is when the old man, no matter...
The mob never forgave Joe Kennedy.
The conversations between Sam Giancana and Stefano Magaddino, and the conversation that the FBI recorded said, he's dead. And he said, okay, good. Now someone should kill the whole family.
Yeah, so it shows
it's here somewhere on the wall here.
So you see there's anger between Magaddino and the Kennedy family, and he wanted them all dead. According to the FBI's exhibit, he wanted the mother, the father, and the entire family killed. He had no feelings for them, so it just shows you that they were looking at them for some specific reasons.
Remember, like I told you, they kill you and then they'll take care of your kid for your whole life because you're not there to take care of.
Since everything's been destroyed, we'll never know those reasons.
No.
But we know that they really weren't too interested in the troops raiding the zoo, collecting things like that, finding golf balls and fur coats and cars at the bottom of Hoyt Lake and Delaware Park. It's a bigger picture. The bigger picture is what's the involvement of politicians with organized crime? What's the involvement with big business with organized crime?
And government in general with organized crime.
And that's the story. And that's
it. That's the story.
All I know is after Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, the Corrales people tape recorded Magaddino's lieutenants saying, "Oh, that's great. We were wondering. We wanted them all dead."
You can look in reference to books and movies, the Joe Bonanno story, Honor Thy Father. When you look at, there's a particular scene when they mention this triangle for liquor, and this triangle is Gaspar Di Gregorio, Joseph Bonanno, and Joseph Kennedy. That triangle also included Stefano Magaddino as the person that was head of that. So now you have the Kennedys are directly tied into Gaspar Di Gregorio and the Magaddinos and the Bonannos. And that's when Joseph Bonanno controlled all of Montreal. The Kennedys were able to get liquor from Canada, and there they had their own trucking and shipping companies. Mm-hmm. So there's your connection to the Mafia. And then when it became time for the Mafia to become a helping hand to get his son Jack elected, who controlled all the unions, all those votes? You got about the Kennedys and the Mafia together during Prohibition. That's where everybody got their money.
So Anthony Scotto came up to Utica. He was head of the Longshoremen's Union. We took him from the airport up to Falcone's house, and then he went back. And then we tied him in, Falcone in with him on a couple of things, and I don't even remember, to tell you the truth. But I know we were down in Brooklyn, and we were trying to get an indictment on Falcone down there, and Scotto. And when they came out for a break, this prosecutor said that this guy coming down the hall was one of the prosecutors from Maine Justice. He says, Bobby Kennedy probably sent him up. He says, we're done. We're not going to get anything.
Then you did.
And they went into a meeting and they had a couple things and nothing.
So you couldn't indict this guy?
No. I think we would have if it hadn't been for that. But who knows?
We did this for 10 years, no matter what the case was. If you look in the penal law, you could start out with arson, and you could go all the way to Z, and the mob did all these particular things. And it wasn't called the mob. it was called the Arm, A-R-M, meaning the Arm was the old man, Magaddino, who had the power to have you killed easily. He was one of the most bloodthirsty killers from Italy up until he came to the United States and then started his activities in New York City and then came to the Buffalo area. And one of the reasons he came to the Buffalo area is because the mob started to understand that Canada was a big prize for them. Whether it be Montreal or Toronto, they could commit any crime they wanted to, and they would get away with it easily. So therefore, this is why Magaddino and his family moved to Lewiston, New York. And by the way, he lived with his two brothers and his son-in-law in 4 homes in a very exclusive area, Lewiston, New York. And we never, not ever went on that street to watch him. We used to laugh at the FBI. They used to fly over with helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft looking for things about the old man. It never worked. We had places where we could have wiretaps and live bugs, and therefore know exactly what the mob was doing, and therefore we could make arrests based on that information.
How were you guys dismantled, and what happened?
So you got beyond me then, because when did that start?
It started in '74.
Not destroying the stuff.
Yes. 72.
They did you? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was in the hospital with a blood clot.
Yeah.
Okay, and we were ready to change because we went through that period of time where we did a magnificent job on burglars and all the rest of the different crimes you're talking about.
And they didn't do that with you, Frank?
No. But you know what happened? You know what happened is the wiretaps. When Frank Church, was he a senator?
Yes, from Nebraska.
He made made the wiretaps illegal. In many ways, we used to get court orders to begin with.
Ex parte orders.
Sure. But he started. They got into the civil rights thing. And everything, they started saying, I think they panicked and probably said, you got to get rid of a lot of this stuff. So.
Did you want to destroy your stuff?
I didn't destroy anything.
Well, okay, so the day I came out of the hospital, after being in the hospital, so he called her, he takes me to surgery. And I was in the hospital for a week, and he cut my femoral vein. It's cut here. So he saved my life. So about 2 weeks later, I was pretty sick with that. I come out of the hospital and I'm going to work. And I stop when they usually park my car, and I walk, limping up to the office. And as I'm walking to the office, I see 3 barrels in front of our office burning. So I said to one of the guys, I said, what the hell's going on here? What are you guys burning? He said, we're burning all the records. And I walk up the stairs, it's burning. So I see Frenchie there, and they got 3 machines cutting the records up also. And I said, what's going on here, Frenchie? He says, Albany told us to close down immediately, headquarters, and burn everything and cut everything up and make sure that all the machines are in the car and bringing all the machines to Albany. And the question is, as I'm looking at this book, I'm trying to find out who gave that particular order to destroy that, all our...
Did you know of anybody that gave that order for his group to destroy that information?
No. You were tied in with those... in fact, I guess you were giving information to the FBI.
Well, no, this is the one thing that they did. Whoever did that, and when I talked to anybody, I talked to Infante about this before he died a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And he didn't even recognize the fact that there was an SIU. He didn't want to know. He didn't want to know about us, and he didn't want to know about who was destroying state property. Everybody's looking. He says, "What happened here?" Well, good old Democratic Party. This is during the Vietnam War, and what were we changing around? Nobody wanted intelligence. Everybody's rights were being this, and what they call the Church Commission and the Kefauver Commission. They started to investigate people that were doing things illegally. we never did anything illegally. Everything we did, breaking into houses, stuff, we could do. Every wiretap or every bug that we put on was given with an order.
This was right after the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah.
So I think George's groups were basically, in a way, George and the ones that are spread out across the state, they're like listening posts to monitor exactly what was going down.
So do you think that's why the information was destroyed?
And I think George's intel that he received, he must have got a hold of something.
Something was inside that information that made them say, you know what, shut everything down but destroy their stuff over there in Buffalo.
Yeah, you had
No,
something.
Hoover made that.
You had something coming out of Buffalo that scared somebody somewhere.
Somewhere. Well, there was a lot of stuff.
They just shut us down and moved us.
Strictly to gather information for the politicians and the powers to be, because really, what are they looking for? You know, like a governor really cares
Inside
about
information.
how many fur coats. They want to know who they're talking to, when they're talking to them. And George can tell you, they conducted surveillances with the former mayors of Buffalo, and they would play hokey pokey on the phone just to trick the mayor to spook them. So they knew, and the governor knew, so they were gathering information. It's always about politicians. It's always about organized crime.
He got the edge.
No one cares about how many fur coats you stole or how many golf balls you stole. The manufacturer doesn't care. They're sold, they're paid for. They're going to sell you another 100,000 anyway. So.
Or they're insured, one or the other.
We shut everything down, and so did White Plains. And I said, well, did you get an order to immediately take that? No, but we did. We burned the tapes.
Well, you know what happened? I think what happened there was when they did that, I think that's when he called me, Larry Mermel called me. He says, the Utica office is closed. You report to Albany. So we all went to Albany. Bill Berry, myself, everybody that was assigned in Utica had to go to Albany. And we were down there for a while. Mermel went out on an investigation, and I took over his spot for a little while as a captain, acting, I guess. And then when he came back, they sent me back. They sent us back to Utica, and we opened up again. So
they never did that to us. They just gave the order. So what's happening here is everybody takes off, and they say one of the guys in Batavia, the captain calls you, George, you're assigned back here. Tommy, you're assigned over here, and you two guys stay on in some kind of a squad. They're forming about narcotics or something. We broke everything. Every one of our wiretaps, every one of our secret places, we were finished. The whole state was finished. Now, since that time, it's been 6 years, and for 6 years, I've traveled this state looking for the guy that gave that order. To burn all this, to take this. I went to Albany, and I talked to a superintendent, a retired guy, and he says, I don't remember. What are you talking about, a squad? In other words, we were never even given the right to say we had a squad. Okay, so I go to some other guy. Geez, I don't know. So I was talking to our secretary a couple of days ago. She called up, she wants a copy of the book. And I said to her, who was the person that gave the order, Linda, to burn all these things and to take them out of this? She says, oh, I think it was Lieutenant Marmel and he got a call from somebody downstairs, meaning at the superintendent's office. And I says, well, what happened to all this? Thousands of reels, not only from the Buffalo office, but from Rochester office, and also the office in White Plains. And she says, well, I don't know. She says, but I think the order came from the governor's office. Who was running for president at that time? I'll tell you another story about the governor's office. And it was Rockefeller who was running against Nixon. So all the stuff, entire stuff, sometimes I have some tough stuff of my own, was burned and was taken back to Albany. So one time I went and one assistant superintendent says, I think it was sent to the National Guard building 22. I went down there, I looked around, I said to one of the guards, I said, where's building 22? He said, building 22? That building was destroyed 30 years ago. What are you talking about, Building 22? We never found out who made that call to this day. Although my secretary told me, our secretary told us that this Lieutenant Marmel walked downstairs to the superintendent's office and came back, says everything's going to be burned, everything's going to be destroyed throughout the state. So that was the end of this tremendous secret unit. The federal people then start investigating. The FBI was doing, they never found out about us that I know of. Nobody ever came to me.
So you were extremely compartmentalized as an intelligence unit. Is it possible that you accomplished a task that even not your own group was aware of, and that finished the assignment per se?
That's a good question. The Appalachian meeting was at a place, a guy named Barbera, who was an underboss for the old man. It was at a very beautiful area around Binghamton, New York. If you know that area, the southern part of the state's beautiful. And that raid, all of a sudden, there was a sergeant by the name of Croswell.
Edgar Croswell was at a hotel discussing the complaints of the hotel manager who just bought the hotel about how they got cheated on a bad check from one of their patrons.
Apparently, they're investigating a minor crime there, him and his partner, at a hotel. And they see some cars in there that shouldn't belong there. New Jersey plates, and a place like Vestal, New York, or Appalachian. It's very unusual. I mean, that's like seeing 60 cars out here from Oregon. You gotta say, well, Oregon.
And he said that the day of the raid, he had his partner, Vince Vasisco, was with him, and they saw people checking into the motel in the Vestal area, and he decided that there's something going on. He went up to the house. There was a couple of cars there. When they looked around back, there were a lot more cars. There were Cadillacs, a bunch of really nice cars, and he got very suspicious that something was going to go on. And of course, the next he called ATF because he thought it might be connected with alcohol tax.
They started to check on this. Well, Croswell knew that Barbera was a bootlegger, and he knew there's another guy down there, Russell Buffalino, who was an underboss for the old man.
And this made Croswell, who never trusted the Barberas, he was very suspicious. He went into the back room and listened to little Joey talking, and he heard, why are they having all these guys coming to the house, to the mansion, the Barbera mansion?
These guys were from New York City, from the docks. They were from California. They were from everywhere you can think of, including Cuba. Okay, and they were there for that purpose.
Right. He got up in the morning, and there was all kinds of activity going on. A couple of the big cars were over at the motel yet. He went over to check on it, and he said that there was nobody in the rooms, and they had refused to sign in to it. They said to see Mr. Barbera about it. They would not sign in at the motel. The rooms were there because Barbera's son had gotten the rooms that day. He then decided to have them check the rooms, and there was nobody in them, but 2 cars were there. One was from out of state and another one.
They started to see different cars coming in, people from the airport with taxi cabs, so they knew it was only one other place they could go to, and that was Barbera's house. Well, they were right. Croswell did something that should be a statue in front of the state police barracks right there.
Croswell and his buddies would show up at Barbera's and start taking down license plate numbers, and that freaked out some of the Barbera guests, but you know, there's nothing they could do about it, so they went. And Croswell called his superiors in Albany, and they said, well, you handle it, don't worry about it, we don't care what it is. But because Croswell had always suspected the Barberas of being into illegal liquor, he got a hold of his friends in the Federal Bureau of Alcohol and Liquor and Taxation. It later changed its name, but they were involved in this too. And because Croswell was the top state police guy south of Binghamton, he got over a dozen troopers involved, and the next morning they all showed up there.
And so they said, well, back up to the house. When they got back up to the house, they pulled up to the yard, and then everybody, they were looking, they were cooking out there. There's a lot of people looking around.
And as these well-dressed guys saw all these state troopers standing out in the parking lot in front of all their cars.
And all of a sudden, everybody started taking off. Some of them with their suits and their ties and everything, running into the woods.
They started running out of the mansion and into the woods, which was bizarre.
So they went down the road and started a roadblock, and that's when they started checking everybody that came out.
So Croswell set up a roadblock about a mile down the hill from the Barbera mansion at the only accessible roadway. And all of a sudden, one of the luxury cars started driving down around 11 in the morning on the day of the raid. And when he saw the state police cars there, he turned around and went back.
He called for more help. They got some uniformed people, and they were checking, and they were grabbing the cars and grabbing the people coming out of the woods. And they ended up getting quite a few of them. I don't know, there's probably a few that got away. Some of them were stopped later.
Their only problem was they didn't have any search warrants, so they couldn't get into the mansion or into the luxury garage, where there were a number of luxury cars, including Magadino's car that he was brought to there from Niagara Falls. But they raided the place anyway, chasing all these well-dressed older men who ran into the forest, and the state troopers chased them and arrested them, including a man named Montana, who was an elected official from Buffalo, New York, who turned out to have been a top lieutenant of Magadino since the 1930s, collecting money as both a public official and as Magadino's top lieutenant in the Buffalo area. And Montana, a year before the Appalachian raid in 1957, had been named Buffalo's Businessman of the Year by some of the top law enforcement and business agencies in Buffalo.
They were stopping them on a roadblock. There's only one way into there. And they stopped them, talked to them, got their licenses, identified them, and then let some of them go. But they had identified them. And then it got so big after a while that they decided that they better take them down to the station. And then they took them down to the station. And he said they were very congenial. Nobody was really yelling about being stopped or anything. They were all fairly, and of course, after a while they had to let them go anyway, so they couldn't charge them. But then he called into Albany at one point and told them about it, and they said, "Sergeant, you got into it, you get out of it." There was no support coming at that point. He had the support of the local uniformed people and BCI people in that area in C Troop, but Albany really didn't want to know about it at that time. And as it turned out, he became actually the hero of the whole thing, and Albany couldn't take any credit for it.
See, they raided the house at the wrong time. They didn't have search warrants, the troopers. They raided the house, and they didn't raid the house, but they looked in the windows, and they saw 4 guys in there. There was Three Fingers Brown, Lucchese. There was the old guy, Profacio, the real mafia guy from the old days. Magadino himself, the old man, and Galenti. They're in the house because they were just talking in the house, and they were starting to give the steaks out in the pit and all the food to everybody. So if they would have raided them a half hour later, we would have got more information.
I think they were all there that were going to be there because they were cooking out and everything. Everything was moving right along, and he at that time thought that there were others that may have not been able to make it, for one reason or another, maybe being ill or something. But it was a good group that, as you say, covered the whole area of the United States and beyond.
There was only one report that I know of was written by the state police. We got it. He's got it. The Appalachian Raid, which nobody thought was anything but just the gangsters meeting. It was just that, oh, they're going to kill somebody. No.
George,
So that was the agenda.
Yeah, that was the
Appalachia was the agenda set forth. So now they had the intelligence about what the intention was.
Us, we had it.
Correct. But
We had it.
was it released?
No.
You got to look at how the 1960s was, man. That does and doesn't have anything to do with it. Here you got Kennedy going off in his corner. He thinks he's the Fed now. You got Magadino and all his guys. They think they're taking over the country. Then you got the real people who are really been running it since 1913. You think they're having it? Which is the people who established the Federal Reserve Bank and banking system. Which is Rothschilds, Wahlbergs, different Rockefellers, the Walkers. There's different families. And so it's not about it, but it is. They're all intertwined. So now you got Kennedy as the president of the United States. He's the head boss. He's trying to start his own Federal Reserve and his own banking. And you got the organized crime people. They're doing their own thing. They want to take over the auto industry, everything.
They wanted to control the garment industry. Frank Sinatra was with them on that. Okay, they wanted to make sure that up and down the country, they were going to work nice with the unions. They were going to go. That's why they had this one guy, Three Fingers Brown, in there. Okay, that was his job. And how do we know about this? They would talk a lot of Italian, and they would also talk about the fact that they're going to use these methods to control America. They found out like a governor's got a girlfriend. They found out a governor's cheating on his taxes. They found a councilman that's got a girlfriend, a guy that's cheating, on and on. I could tell you about the story. A guy that likes them. So they were going to use that against everybody, whether it be Chicago. If you look at the Appalachian, we're the only ones that have the only authentic report on that. We're the only ones. But if you look at that carefully, you'll find where all these guys are from, number one, throughout the country, and number two you'll find is what they didn't have guns on them and a lot of money, but they all had a little card that used to say Johnson's Bakery, Thomas's trucking company, and that. So we knew that. Well, anyway, what happened there, and people don't know, is when the raid started, which is interesting, it was at 12 o'clock. They had all their steaks there, they had all their specialties there, and what happens all of a sudden is that the troopers raided the place at 12 o'clock, and who was in the house talking? Three Fingers Brown, okay, Lucchese, the old man, Magadino, a guy named Profaccio, old-time mafia guy, that the last time he was in such a situation like this, 1921 in Cleveland, where the mafia left. That was the last time they met. And then that's why 57 is so important. And another gangster, Galenti. They were in the house. And who was also in the house was Barbera, who owned the house, one of his workers, one of his gardeners, and just a worker. So he's listening to all this in Italian. And he's also in English. He's listening to all this. So if they would have raided him a half hour later, we would have got more information from this Blossom, which we didn't know. I didn't know about Blossom till I talked to Beninati, and this Sergeant Beninati, who was at the raid. He's dead now, 92 years old, war hero. And he goes to the house, and he makes friends with this guy. Blossom, you see the name on the report, and he makes friends with them, and he starts to tell them what he heard. This was not for gangsters shooting people. This was not for doing things like that. This was controlling the American economy.
Because the whole country's dynamics are changing. The old guard don't want to admit things are going on. Like Sam said, they don't want to admit that some dumb country bumpkins from different towns in Sicily are basically like Rome. They're taking over. They'll take over tomorrow. And they'll have you as someone that they put up in place by getting you elected, him elected, me elected, and all the people that are in charge, they own.
Appalachian was their summit, the best thing that ever happened to them. They knew that they could. Frank Sinatra was with Three Fingers Brown in New York one day, and he was at a table, and he was with a woman who controlled about 6 or 8 different places where women's dresses are made. And Three Fingers Brown was there to had a dinner for her and all that. He wanted to buy her businesses. Who was sitting at the table with him? Frank Sinatra. Now, Frank Sinatra, all of a sudden, somebody took a picture of him, and he called, Three Fingers Brown called the guy over. He said, "Let me have your camera." He says, "Here." I gave him money. He says, "Buy another camera." They had a pic. They didn't want Frank Sinatra to have a picture with Three Fingers Brown. Okay, Lucchese. So this is what they were doing. This was why Appalachian is so. I never dreamed that Appalachian was better than all these different arrests that I told you about. All these arrests were constant from that particular idea that Rockefeller had to destroy these people.
Well, you got to remember too. I mean, when you look at even Kennedy's assassination, if you look at the context and tone of all the things that you say, the mafia. The different families, they're ecstatic that he did it, that he's dead. They're just glad someone killed him, because in their minds, they were going to do it, someone else just did it. And probably the real people who did it are the real people that really control the money. I mean, 6 months before the guy died, he signed his only executive order. That's probably when it killed him, because that's the other banking community in economics.
When Magadino, the problem with Magadino was all of a sudden he started to lose face because of the Appalachian raid. And some of the New York gangsters were going to start to just hurt him a little bit and ask him questions, although he was the Don of Dons. He was still the boss. I'll give you a classic example. The sadness when President Kennedy was shot. Who came around that also wanted to be president? Bobby Kennedy. And to a certain degree, the mob had some friends in the Kennedy family, the old man, for instance, Joe Kennedy, and they got some help from Jack being elected president. Not an overt act of committing crimes, but some help through the unions. Well, Bobby Kennedy come along, and what he did, he started to double-cross the mafia, the arm. What happened? The old man found out about this. The old man ordered the murder of the entire Kennedy family. Now, nobody knows this but us. He ordered people to go to Hyannisport and kill the entire family, kill everybody, the entire Kennedy family. They went, usually the organized crime got their dynamite from Canada. By the way, this is one of the only units that we ever worked with, the RCMP, the Mounties. They're very good. Anyway, they went and they got their dynamite, or going to get their dynamite, and 2 machine guns. And the old man was going to send 2 gangsters to kill the entire family in Hyannisport. Well, the New York group, the 5 families in New York, found out about this, and they talked about this. And they told the old man, "Stefano, this is not the right thing to do. Things are going good for us now with the business, even though we had the raid, but we still have to do what we want to do here. It's no good to kill these people," and they didn't. This is another time when we knew that Magadino was kind of losing a little of his power, because he was questioned. Okay, and when they said to him not to do this, he took their advice.
So this isn't about, like, all 3 people would be glad to do it. All 3 people. All 3 individuals. You have the mafia, the people that are running organized financial institutions, they're tough too. And then you got Jack Kennedy going out on a limb saying, not only am I in charge, but I think I'm going to change the economic structure of the United States and back up $4 billion in $2 bills, and I'm just going to print them. So you have a lot going on at once. It's a powder keg, and then you have all mixed within that civil rights.
Do you recall stuff that you read in the material before it was burned? Anything tied in with Jack or Bobby Kennedy?
The only one?
Melissa Lund.
I have asked, people have called me, the only guy left. Reporters have called me about who killed Jack Kennedy. The mob did not kill him. The mob had nothing to do with that. His father was the friend of Joe Colombo. He did, and also Joe Bonanno. They did not kill Jack Kennedy. What they wanted to do was, the old man wanted to kill Bobby Kennedy because Bobby Kennedy double-crossed him. So they had nothing to do with Jack Kennedy, but they went as far, and we had a problem with that. I don't know if there was a Secret Service or what, and we never trusted anybody, and I'm glad now we didn't trust the Massachusetts State Police, and I'm not too sure if there was a big group of people, Secret Service, I don't know, but we were saying to ourselves, what are we going to do if we know for sure they're on their way up there? We can't let them kill the whole family. You know, what are we going to? We had these, these cases. We thought, thank God, that later on we got information that the old man, they told the old man, Galenti, and all the big time guys in New York City, the 5 family, says, do not do this, because the Appalachian Raid was not set up. We're the only ones right now that know what the Appalachian Raid was about. That raid was to control the United States economy. They had everything set up from the sugar that was cut. They had a guy from Cuba there, Traficante. They controlled all the sugar.
Have you believed that one bullet
No.
killed him? I believe 2 things. JFK was assassinated. 2, JFK he was shot, or at least tried to be shot at by Oswald. And there's definite involvement from these groups. It's a deep story, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that's how we grew up. So we grew up very happy. We had whatever we wanted. We had a nice childhood. So that's how I remember my grandparents. Like, they were just regular, like your grandparents would be anybody's grandparents. We knew nothing of anything else that was going on. Because I grew up really nice and I have no complaints. I can't say I had bad parents, bad grandparents, bad uncles, aunts. I had a really great childhood growing up until I got married, and then we had nice times. And then, we got married, and who moved here and who moved there, but we always ended up going, every day. I don't think there was a day that I didn't see my grandmother and grandfather. One day, I was married. My cousin Rosemary Montana, she was married. She had, I didn't have any kids, but she had 3, and we had her little one in the car with us, and we were going shopping. And we were leaving, and as we were leaving, we were going up Upper Mountain Road, and I said to her, where are all these police coming from? Like, we saw tons of police, and I thought the barracks used to be right on Military Road there. And she says, I don't know. I said, oh my God, I never saw so many. It was like a movie. So we went to Tops, and then we took the baby to McDonald's, and coming back, we were coming down Bronson Drive, and we were going to turn on Dana, and it was blocked. And he says, I'm sorry, you can't go down there. And she says, what do you mean I can't go down there? I live down there. And he says, well, I need to see your driver's license. So she showed them, and she says, I'm sorry, I live down there. I have a baby in the car. The baby was like a year old. They wouldn't let us down there. And I says, I'm sorry, I have to get down there. I live down there. And I said, well, my mother lives down there. I was living in Talladega. And then we told them who we were, and they weren't going to let us. I said, look, I'm getting out of the car. I'm walking. We got baby in the car, so they let us go through. When we got through, I never saw so many police in my whole life. I said, Rosemary, something's going on. But we were so stupid, we didn't know. And so we pull into my aunt's driveway, and as we pull in, we see all these police all over the place, right? And I'm going, oh my, something's going on. So we go into my aunt's house, and they were like right in the whole house, and she was getting panicky because all her boxes were in there because she was going to be moving across the street. I go, what are you people looking for in my bedroom? All they found was I had records and stuff of all Paul Anka, because that's my favorite thing. And I'm going, oh my God, you're ruining all my stuff. And my brother's like, oh my God, she's going to kill them. And then I went to house, and I go, it was getting worse and worse. And then, like, all the neighbors were coming over to make sure my grandmother and grandfather were all right. It was the stupidest thing I've ever seen. It must have been hundreds. It was like a movie. It was like The Sopranos on TV. I thought I'd never in my life seen anything like this.